Okay, so after talking about visualizations, we're actually going to do a few visualizations. SPSS. Now, for your project, I am looking for a few visualizations of data. You can use Excel like we did at the beginning of the semester, or we can use a little bit of SPSS. Now, SPSS has lots of charts, graphs built in. It also has something called a chart builder, which enables you to do kind of simple graphs that you can play around with. And it works a little bit like the graphs in Excel. So let's just start by we want to look a little bit at our distribution of scores for our math quiz. This is the data set that we played around with earlier in the chapter. So this is students. They had a math quiz. We kind of rescaled it, if you remember, between 0 and 100. And let's just kind of first choose a type of graph. So the first thing we do is let's just have a look at the range of, you know, the range of scores with it for this math exam. So we're going to pick a simple histogram. Now we're going to drag Math Quiz 100 to the x-axis, and then we're just going to keep everything else as default, and we're going to click OK. So we have the output here. We can see it's kind of pretty much almost, it's not too far from a normal distribution. We've got the median score around 60, 65. We've got kind of then decreasing up to 100. And then we have a range of low scores with people who obviously didn't study and revise in the 20s and 30s. So the histogram gives us an overall view of the kind of distribution of our data before we do any kind of statistics. Now we can also have a stacked histogram. So let's just do graphs again, chart builder. And this time we're going to play this second one, which is a stacked histogram. And we have it the same as before. We still keep the math quiz 100. Let's just kind of set the color. Let's just do it by gender first. Click OK. And then we can see the distribution of scores by gender. So we could use this to look at whether there were any differences between male and female scores. There doesn't really look to be much of a difference here. Maybe slightly more of the lower scores are male, but it could just be kind of because of a smallish sample. Let's just do the one that was on the slide. So we go to Graphs, Chart Builder. And let's just replace gender with the major. So obviously, we'd expect economics majors to be maybe better at math than psychology or sociology majors. Honestly, there's a little bit too much information on this graph, I showed before. There's too many majors and not enough data. So again, the graph is what we say in England was a little bit of a dog's breakfast. So it's quite hard to see patterns here, but you can see a clump of low scores for biology majors. So let's just do another type of histogram. And let's just do what we call a frequency polygon. And this just shows you probably did this in Stats 1, drawing it by hand, but this just shows the distribution of the data over time. So we could just do Math Quiz 100. If you look to the right, element properties kind of gives the properties of, for example, the x-axis. We're going to do this generated automatically, but we can actually set our axes. The same with the y-axis. Also kind of what we're actually measuring in the area. Now we can choose the statistic to use, and we're just going to do a simple count. And let's click OK. So we have the counts of the different exam scores over time. We can actually change that. So let's just do graphs, chart builder. Let's just do a cumulative count. And we can see almost, this is the cumulative distribution of the quizzes over time. So we can actually look, what's our 80th percentile? So we could say at least, 80% of the class are getting below a score of, 83 or 84. Or let's just see the score of 60. Maybe this is the pass value. And we go up a little bit and we can say, okay, about 45% of the class have passed this exam. So we can also do this as percentages. So let's just do graph, chart builder. Let's just change to a percentage. So we do it in percentage of the students. Now, this doesn't make a huge amount of sense. We can have the percentage with a certain score. This is much better cumulative. So we go charts, graph builders, and let's just do cumulative percentage. And again, we can actually look, rather than the number of people, we can actually look at the percentage here. Okay, so the final little histogram we're going to do population pyramid, and this is named as population pyramids. Look at the proportions of the population, different age groups for males and females. But you can actually use a population pyramid for lots of different things, not just population. So let's just say we're going to look at the Math Quiz 100. And here, that's going to be my distribution variable. And then my split variable, we're going to do gender. Now click OK. Now this shows, and what's interesting, this is a little bit different from the slides. This is because we added another category to gender. So we have male, female, and other. We can see the relative distribution. You can see we have many more males, around 60. And then the female distribution is a little bit more spread out. Now, ideally, we want to show males up against females. So let's just do a little bit of an alteration. And let's go back, because as we have nobody in the other category at the moment, we'll just temporarily remove this. Now, let's do the same again. Click OK. And then we get the more traditional population pyramid. To get that, you need a category with two values. So again, we can see a large number of males around just over 60, with more at the lower end of the distribution, and the females just like a little bit more spread out. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is some box plots. So again, going back to Business Stats 1 and possibly some of your schoolwork. So let's do graphs, chart builder. We've got box plot down here. We're just going to stick a simple box plot. And what we're going to do is we're going to do Math Quiz 100 to the y-axis. And we're going to do the reason to the x-axis. So the reason for taking the stats class. And then we're going to click OK. And you can see here what we have plotted in the middle of the box, we have the median. Then at the bottom of the box, we have the 25th percentile, i.e. 25% of values are lower than this, 75 above. At the top, we have the 75th percentile, and the little, what we call the whiskers, are the lowest and the highest values. Now, sometimes, if you have any extreme outliers in the data, they will be plotted above the whiskers. Sometimes we'll take from the bottom of the box to the top of the box, which is called the interquartile range. If from the top of the box or the bottom of the box, we have values more than 1.5 times this length, so the length of the box, away from the box, then we actually plot them outside of the whiskers. But here we're not doing this, so we don't have any outliers. So the whiskers show the lowest and the highest values. And again, we see that people taking the class for personal interest, kind of a math stats class, do much better than people who take it because they absolutely need to do the class, but in reality, they probably didn't want to take it. So we can add some more information to this. So we can do graphs, chart builder. Let's convert it to a clustered box plot, and we still have the information below, but now let's just add gender. Click OK. And you now see that we have basically the same information as before, but we have a separate plot for each gender. We actually have, so again, let's just look for the bottom of the box, then we take the length of the box and then 1.5, and we have 1 point outside of that. So we do have an outlier here. But again, we can look at the distribution. Personal interest for both males and females has the highest box. we can't really see much kind of data between males and females, except there's a little bit more. The center box from 25th to 75th percentile is a little bit more squashed for males than it is for females. Okay, so the next thing we're going to show is a scatter plot. And scatter plots are the ways of showing relationships between quantitative variables. So we're going to do graph, chart builder. And if you recall my initial description of the data, we had various measurements of like heart rate and anxiety. We're trying to measure before people take a stats test, what's their heart rate before, what's their heart rate after, and what's their base heart rate. So let's just double click on the left of the galley. We'll double click scatter or box plot. And we're going to choose the simple scatter plot, which is the first one. And let's just double click that. And we get kind of basically two axes. And we want some more, we want this current data. We don't want this current data. We're going to drag heart rate pre to our x-axis, heart rate post to our y-axis. Let's just remove heart rate pre, heart rate post. This will show the relationship of heart rate before you take the exam and heart rate after you took the exam. And it's not a perfect relationship, but some people generally have higher heart rates than others. So most people who have high heart rate before the exam would also have high heart rate after the exam. We can add a little bit more information. We can double click on this graph. And we've got up here, we've got some lines. This is called add fit line at total. So we're going to click on this. And what this does is this actually fits a regression line to our data. So now we can actually find the line of best fit in the data, which we're going to talk about in chapter 12. We may want to look at, the relationships between multiple variables at once. So let's go to graphs, let's go to chart builder. And let's just go to what's called the scatter plot matrix, which is this one here. And then let's just add pretty much kind of the quantitative variables dealing with the maths exam and also measures of heart rate and anxiety. So I'm just going to choose 3 heart rates, 2 anxieties, and the math quiz. I'm going to select those and just put them all to the scatter matrix. Click OK. And then we have the relationships. Now let me just fit the line as we did before. So double click, fit line, close. And basically, the ones that are more kind of balls show very little relationship between the variables. But the ones where there is kind of a line, let's just make this a little bit bigger. There we go. We can actually see all the labels now. The ones where, you can see there's almost, so for example, between anxiety-based and anxiety-pre, there's a little bit of clustering, but you can actually see there's this kind of actual relationship. People with higher anxiety-based tend to have higher anxiety before the exam. And again, heart rate pre and heart rate post and heart rate base. These all have kind of relationships. While generally the relationship between the math quiz and HR base, there's a flat line. There's no real relationship between how well you do on math exam and your resting heart rate. That's more to do with your overall general health. Okay, so there were a few interesting plots, and I'm happy to help you guys out if you want any help with other types of plots for your project.